Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we dig into the research papers and the complex reports to pull out the knowledge you really need. Today we're tackling a huge one. It's a challenge that, in a way, defines the future of technology, the ethical dilemmas of autonomous AI. And we're going beyond just the high-level philosophy. We're getting into system architecture.
Right.
When an intelligent machine makes a choice on its own, who is responsible? I mean, how do we even begin to make sure those decisions align with our own values?
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're zeroing in on this proactive strategy called ethics by design, or EBD. The sources we have, they're not just theoretical. They include some really detailed analyses from groups tracking accountability, showing how developers are trying to, embed moral values right into an AI's DNA.
So long before it ever goes live.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Long before it interacts with anyone.
Okay, so we've got a clear path. This is a real shortcut to understanding the engineering side of responsibility. We're looking at what happens when moral thinking isn't just a slide in a presentation, but is actually written into the system's code, guaranteeing accountability from the very start. All right, let's unpack this core concept then. Ethics by design. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but what does it really mean on the ground? The definition we're using talks about the continuous, proactive integration of moral considerations into every single stage of an AI system's lifecycle.
And that every single stage part is so critical. It represents a total shift in mindset.
Right.
Ethics is no longer a retrospective review. It's not some checklist you just tick off right before you deploy. We're talking about embedding values from the very first idea through data collection, development, deployment, and all the maintenance that comes after.
So the goal is to build the morality right into the architecture.
That's it. You're building it in, not bolting it on.
Which means we move past asking, did the system do something wrong after the fact? And instead we're mandating, is this system designed to be ethically strong from the start?
Yes.
And I think it's important to note, this is not just some academic debate anymore. You have major consulting groups, like Deloitte, actively pushing EBD as a practical guide for real-world companies.
It's becoming a necessary engineering requirement, not just a philosophical ideal.
So what's the urgency? Why now?
Well, the urgency is obvious if you just look at what happens without it. Without this intentional design, AI systems just, they naturally absorb and then magnify the biases that are already in their training data.
Right.
They make these opaque decisions you can't understand, and they operate with no clear line of responsibility. And that erodes public trust, and more importantly, it can cause real measurable societal harm. EBD is really about building stability into the tech before it causes instability out in the world.
That makes a lot of sense. So if that's the principal proactive design, then developers must need some kind of a roadmap. They can't just operate on a vague, do the right thing feeling.
No, absolutely not.
And our sources keep pointing to the global guidelines, especially the ones from the European Commission for Trustworthy AI as that key framework.
The EU guidelines are definitely a cornerstone, and they, along with work from institutions like the Alan Turing Institute, provide exactly that roadmap. So instead of a vague mandate, you get a list of 7 core principles developers have to follow.
Okay.
But just listing them out, it doesn't really do justice to how complex this is.
No, I agree. Just reading 7 bullet points is not a deep dive. Let's maybe group them a bit to get into the really tough engineering choices. So what if we start with, say, technical integrity and trust? That would cover things like technical robustness, safety, and privacy.
Good idea.
What challenges does EBD force engineers to face right there?
Well, the big challenge is often a trade-off. It's performance versus rigor. So technical robustness means the system has to be reliable, secure, resilient to attack. But then implementing Principle 3, high-level, auditable privacy and data governance, that adds a ton of complexity.
So you can't just move fast and break things.
You can't. EBD demands rigorous testing, data minimization, constant security checks. It adds time and it adds cost. You have to prove its resilience and its commitment to privacy.
Okay, so that's a big one. What's the next major area?
I'd say the next complex group is human agency and oversight. The principle says humans have to remain in meaningful control.
And the key word there is meaningful, right? What does that actually look like? Is it just a big red emergency stop button?
No, it's much more than that. Meaningful control means the human operator can understand the context of the AI's decision. They can override it if they need to, and they can ensure their fundamental rights aren't being violated.
So it's about transparency during the process, not just after.
Exactly. EBD requires designing interfaces and logging systems that provide that context, not just the final answer. The whole system has to be traceable back to its human-defined goals.
All right, and that brings us to the third big group, which feels like where it gets really complicated. Societal impact. So we're talking about diversity, non-discrimination, fairness, and societal well-being.
Hmm. This is where the rubber meets the road.
This is where engineering meets sociology.
It is. And achieving fairness is not a simple statistical check. EBD demands that systems are tested over and over for discriminatory outcomes across all sorts of different populations. The Alan Turing Institute has done great work showing that fairness metrics can actually conflict with each other.
How so?
Well, you might optimize an AI for, say, 99% accuracy, but doing that might inadvertently sacrifice fairness for a minority group. It might be less accurate for them. Ethical design demands that you build in mechanisms to spot and fix those trade-offs.
So you're forcing designers to sometimes choose fairness over raw performance.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've got the roadmap. Let's drill down now into the why behind accountability, because that's the final principle, and you could argue it's the most essential one for building public trust.
I would argue that, yes.
So if we're embedding accountability using EBD, what are the primary architectural functions that make that happen?
It really serves two critical interlocking functions here. The first is simply fostering transparency. This is the absolute key to traceability. It means you have to document everything, the ethical considerations, the design choices, the biases in the training data, right from the very beginning.
And that documentation makes the AI's decision-making process understandable, even if the deep learning model itself is kind of a black box.
That's the idea. Even if you can't interpret the code line by line, you can follow the process.
But wait a minute. If we mandate total transparency, every input, every log, aren't we forcing companies to sacrifice performance or maybe even give away the intellectual property that makes their system unique?
That is a vital tension, a very real one. EBD doesn't necessarily mean you have to publish your proprietary algorithm. It mandates transparency in the process and the intent.
Okay.
Think of it like this. You don't need the secret recipe to audit a restaurant's kitchen. You need traceable logs. You need to see the ingredients that went in, the safety checks that were followed, the temperatures that were recorded.
I see. So the ability to audit is the key, which leads directly to the second function, which must be promoting fairness and reducing bias.
Absolutely. If you can't trace a decision, you can't find where bias crept in. And you certainly can't assign responsibility when something goes wrong. Ethical design mandates that continuous testing. It requires diverse data sets and automated logging systems that can flag potentially unfair outcomes for a human to review.
So this is really where the technical framework connects with the societal necessity. The sources we looked at really emphasize that this isn't just about writing better code, it's about ensuring AI systems don't make social inequalities even worse.
That's the whole point. We're trying to protect the integrity of society as much as the integrity of the algorithm. Fostering trust is everything, and organizations like the World Economic Forum stress this constantly.
And when you look at the legal side of things, it becomes even more clear why this is so necessary. There's so much complexity around, legal personhood and liability for autonomous systems.
Oh, it's a huge topic. The Harvard Law Review has been covering this for years.
It's that classic dilemma. If a self-driving car makes a truly unexpected, fatal error, who is responsible? The company, the programmer, the data supplier, the machine itself.
EBD is the architectural answer to that endless legal debate. By clarifying who is responsible through proactive design and those mandatory traceability logs, you move the blame upstream. The accountability lands on the designers and the operators who fail to follow the framework.
It prevents the system from becoming a legal black hole. So what does all this mean for the organizations actually building these things? It's clear the implications of adopting EBD are huge, and they go way beyond just the engineering department.
Oh, completely. Starting with organizational culture, it requires a massive investment in truly interdisciplinary teams. It's not enough to just have brilliant coders anymore.
Right.
You need to bring in ethicists, legal experts, social scientists, and have them work right alongside the engineers to ensure that ethical integration is comprehensive. Ethics can't be a separate department you call sometimes. It has to be part of the product lifecycle itself.
And for that internal shift to work, you need a supportive regulatory environment outside the company. We need frameworks that can actually enforce these EBD standards.
Yes, and the research points to a need for regulatory bodies. You see this in discussions from the Council of Europe, the UN, to develop clear standards, and maybe even certification processes for AI systems that follow EBD.
And here's the crucial part, right? The part that gives it teeth.
The enforcement mechanism. The framework has to allow for penalties, for sanctions, or for mandatory corrective actions when the guidelines are violated. Without consequences, these EBD frameworks just become suggestions that get ignored when market pressure gets intense.
So accountability requires consequences.
It has to.
And finally, that brings us to the people, the talent pipeline. If EBD is the future of design, we have to prepare people for this.
We do. EBD means we need to prepare the next generation of AI developers and users with a strong foundation in ethical reasoning. They need the tools to navigate these moral complexities, which means ethics has to be part of the technical curriculum.
Not just a single elective course they take once.
No, not an afterthought. The goal is to create a culture where developers see these ethical considerations as an intrinsic, non-negotiable part of innovation. It's the very definition of a high-quality product.
That brings us full circle. The core takeaway from this deep dive seems really clear. Ethics by design is not just some philosophical ideal. It's a practical, urgent imperative for the responsible development of AI.
I believe so. By embedding accountability and moral thinking right from the start, we can ensure that we build intelligent systems that are trustworthy, that are fair, and that ultimately enhance human flourishing for generations.
Absolutely. And that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to think about. If accountability is designed from the first line of code, and it has to be measurable for certification, what specific quantitative metric beyond just logging do we need to truly certify that an AI system is morally sound? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.